Oh, yes, that was the Horn of Gondor. And this is a fun episode, a recap episode. This is what happened at Theology Beer Camp. And I have here a number of the podcasting fellas who were rocking the mics at the Geek stage. We have my Tolkien bestie over here, Nick Polk. What's up, Nick?
What's up, dude? Many smooches to you, Tolkien bestie.
Ooh, yeah. We have Wilbo Baggins returning to the podcast.
Oh yeah, the suburban drive mate for many an hour. An hour.
Yes, we road tripped to camp, friends.
We road tripped.
We got another member of the Warriors 3. Mr. Ryan Doze is here. Wilbo being the other one.
Yeah.
True.
Hey, buddy.
What's up? What's up? This
nothing much.
No, you're getting to talk to us. That's what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very big day for me. It's a very big day for me. I haven't seen you guys for days.
Yeah. And on the other mic, it's TJ, who's a part of the whole systematic Geekology crew, and he just got back from his first time at Theology Beer Camp.
Yeah, my beer camp cherry.
It
has been popped.
It has, and that's.
And we can tell that he's been corrupted by beer camp. That's not something he would have said on Systematic Geekology a week ago.
Or Geek feels a little more family friendly.
A little more family friendly. Being in a van or a truck for 16 hours when the conversations, TJ feels a little looser. So that's
Well, I feel like the proclaimers really undersell how far 500 miles is. I'm never walking that.
Yes, the Proclaimers are from band in Scotland, and the 500 miles is in reference to this. It's actually, there's like a 500-mile trail along the coast. I didn't know that. Learned it when I was living there, or my Scottish neighbors said it, and I just believed that it was true. You never know. But we just got back from beer camp, so since y'all were running the Geek stage, I want to get to hear about that because I've just started downloading all these videos, and I've seen the videos that y'all from your session, but I haven't got to actually watch them yet. So I don't really know what happened in any of the sessions I wasn't doing because I was usually running between fixing things or connecting things or whatever. So
rescheduling.
That's always fun. Thanks, Pete Ends. Getting sick. Yeah, but I thought first I wanted to hear y'all's general impressions. If there's a particular thing or experience or moment from camp that was a kind of a highlight to you, and then I want to get the dirty on the Geek stage. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, Will, your church hosted last year, so I want to hear. Let's hear from you first.
Yeah, I was really looking forward to being a part of it. Because I wasn't necessarily going to be the one who was going to be the last person there to cut the lights off or lock up the doors. There's not a fire in the back room. And so being able to go, I mean, we still have responsibilities with the Geek stage and thinking through what we're going to talk about and discuss and manage a room and microphones and those kinds of things. But in terms of just going to enjoy it and not being host, I was really, really looking forward to that. We had a blast last year. I couldn't be more proud of our church and the people who came. Very moving, meaningful experience and meeting people that I listened to a lot in my earbuds and meeting them face to face and then being just as cool in person as I imagined them to be on the podcast that I listened to. And then some people I've saw for the first time in person, like Joshua and Nick and Ryan. And it was just an incredible time last year. This year, knowing what was going to happen, I wasn't caught off guard. I kind of knew what was going to lay out. There were some surprises along the way in terms of what unfolded in the schedule and the people, but all in all, it was a blast. I liken it to Tripp's kind of all that Tripp does the entire year kind of culminates, crescendos into beer camp. And so you have this kaiju monster of Tripp Fuller and everything that is his personality, to karaoke, to games, to incredible sermons, to beer. and Geek Stage is just an expression of and what he represents and what he wants to embody out in the world on just like peak level. So being a part of that and being a part of planning and thinking through all that stuff was an honor, and it was a beautiful, beautiful communal experience.
Oh, awesome.
There you go.
Well, TJ, it was your first beer camp experience. You had a nice little 16-hour drive there and a 16-hour drive back with a bunch of old men.
Yeah,
because you're just a baby.
I'm so baby.
Yeah, like Gen Z-ing it up.
Barely.
Like
Hold on.
You're the next generation. What's after Z?
Alpha. Alpha is the next one.
Oh, I'm glad we got this worked out. But TJ, tell us what your experience. If people have never been before, you went, and now you know, and knowing's half the battle.
Knowing is half the battle.
Boom.
Yeah. So beer camp for me is really kind of insane. Being in a place that is, I've probably never been around so many doctors before. Like nobody's even calling each other doctor. You just find out when somebody else mentions them that it isn't talking to them. It's like, oh, yeah, Dr. Fuller. It's like, but being around so many people who are so well educated that are still just people, that was really fun for me, because it's easy to forget that, people who are willing to go to school for that long are also still just people. Because, most people just aren't willing. I did my 12 years and then 3.5 more. That was enough for me for now. But I've never felt, I guess, so safe, welcomed. Like, I'm not queer, but being somewhere that is so affirming was really nice. It felt like what a church should feel like to me. That was awesome. I've never gotten to experience that before. And then just being surrounded by so much knowledge, being able to ask basically anyone you walk past any question and either get an answer or direct it to someone who can give you an answer is awesome. It's the coolest thing in the world. And the beer is good. I host Drinks with Tejas as my own little, segment show. So beer camp, I'm all about it. I just don't have a big enough stomach.
Well, all in due time. I'm very glad you came, and I think you embraced all the different parts of beer camp, like all the way to rocking the fire pit once we were done. Like when you didn't just go to beer camp, you did beer camp.
I did beer camp.
Oh man, did he ever? Now, being host of Drinks with Tejas, is there a beer that stood out for you? A particular beer that jumped out? Quick answer.
So flavor wise, not necessarily, but presentation wise, someone from about an hour north of Springfield, where we were, brought his brewery's English Standard Bitters lager, and he brought it in growlers, and it was pretty good lager.
Nice.
It wasn't too bitter. It was still pretty smooth, and there were 32 ounces of it.
Yeah, and he was just carrying the lagers around. He was drinking out of the growlers. All right, Nick,
just leave them there.
You returned it. What was your highlight or thing to thinking about this year?
Yeah, so my second beer camp, and Brian and I talked about this when we got there, but being there last year, we were kind of the newbies. We were kind of just meeting everybody. You know how the awkward thing goes. Everyone was very welcoming and it was very fun. But now we've come back and we're like, feel like we're like the upperclassmen who kind of bring the freshmen under our wing, freshman being TJ. We're over there. We're like the quote unquote cool kids, even though this is like our second one, total sophomore move, and, but it was just a great time. I mean, the highlight for me, which was very similar to last year. So last year, the last day, Diana Butler Bass gave like a sermon, and then Tripp, kind of spoke and let us out, and then Kevin Garcia did like a benediction. and it was really awesome. And this year it was kind of like upped up, right? It was Tripp gave the message, which was really awesome. And then Kevin Garcia did the benediction again, and we had communion this time, and just bawled and felt connected with people, and just hearing people who, just being surrounded by people who have a mixture of experiences in the church, ranging from pretty decent to terrible and dramatic. Kind of everybody saying, you're God's beloved, is huge. And then of course we can nerd out about everything from niche things in Star Wars to very, very particular metaphysical questions related to panpsychism. So, you can't beat that. You can't beat that. And of course, day drinking 3 days in a row, which I'm having withdrawals.
Yeah. Felt.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Nick. All right, Ryan.
Okie dokie.
You didn't have to drive near as long this year.
No, it was freaking awesome. I didn't have to drive 24 hours. It was nice to have something that was pseudo local, but like realizing it was still 7 hours away. But yeah, it was awesome. I mean, once the like the date and the time and all that I was like, I looked over at my wife Kim and I was like, well, there's no way we're missing this. And then we're like putting together this geek stage. I was like, okay, we've leveled up. All the things I loved about the first beer camp that I went to last year, where Nick and I were freshmen, leveling everything up was my favorite part in a lot of ways, because we got to do like what we do best, just on a bigger stage, literally. But kind of something that Nick hit on, like I think personally, like as a whole, I really loved the geek stage. I love how much time and space we got to devote to conversations that, they connect with people on a different level than maybe the academic, the strictly academic side, or some people feel like maybe they're more accessible. I know I definitely heard that feedback from a few people, which was really encouraging and really awesome. Nick and I even had like a conversation at the after party with someone that just came up to us and was just like, I need you to know how great the Lord of the Rings panel was, and here's why. Like, I felt like it was the part that really connected to me. And I was like, oh, okay, this is proof that what we set out to do, we achieved. But like, just on a personal like basis, I don't have any community like this anywhere close. Like, I don't have anybody that, that is super local. I mean, I live out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Nebraska. So I don't have that person nearby, or even like one person nearby. And so getting back together with my friends, I spend all year bugging them with memes and jokes and random ideas. And, I feel like I bother Will all the time. He's my Obi-Wan Kenobi. So I bother him with every little Luke Skywalker thought that I have that pops into my head. And
I want to go to Tashi Station.
Power converters, you sound so annoying. But like, honestly, getting to reconnect with Nick and Josh Patterson from Rethinking Faith. Like, yeah. I love being able to be around my friends, legitimately people that I just enjoy so much, and getting to meet new people. That's even better, because it's just more people to reconnect with next year. All the different connections is my favorite part. And then, one of the last nights of beer camp, Kim and I, my wife Kim and I, we found one person that was like, oh, hey, you said you were from Nebraska. And I was like, I'm from Omaha. And so I was like, oh, cool. So we sit down at a table, we start talking. And then two other guys overhear us talking about like a spot in Omaha. And they're like, oh my gosh, you've been there before. We live in this part of Omaha. At the end of the conversation, there were 7 people from Nebraska around this table.
Wow.
And I had gone into this weekend with the conclusion of like, I'm the only one in the state. Like, I'm the only one. And now, I know that there's at least 5-6 other guys in Omaha that are listening and engaging with the same things. And that's incredibly comforting to be a part of. So
yeah.
That's a few of my favorite parts.
Yeah. That's half the population of Nebraska.
Yeah. That theme of you're not alone is a big part of it. because I think I think people who listen to podcasts and find their community online, they know there's other people out there exploring the questions that we wrestle with. I'm from a mainline Protestant congregation, and we're all churchy and churched, and I don't know if a lot of my long-term members have a lot of religious trauma, but those who do have religious trauma and hurt, often feel alone. So these communities, online communities, speak to their questions, speak to their soul and their identity. And so to gather in Theology Beer Camp and to see people face to face, the embodiment of what you're wrestling with all year, listen to, and it's very pastoral, these podcasts and online communities, but to be with one another, to know that you're not alone is a big part of it. And I felt the gratitude as people came up to me who were at last year and said, "Oh, last year was great. We really appreciate you opening your doors." I didn't know there were churches that were like that. And I was like, man, I wish I could let my congregants know that, yeah, people are saying that they have it good. But there's a lot of people who don't have that community. So this is their chance to have like a reunion and to get together and give hugs and have a beer together and have a conversation that you're not alone. And to have Kevin at the end share communion, which embodies Jesus saying to his disciples, "Yeah, I'm leaving for a while, but you're not going to be alone. You have this, you have me with you, the body of Christ for you," to look out to everyone in the eyes and say, "You're not alone." Was a very, very special moment that I hope people will carry people on throughout this year and find ways to embody that in their communities and where they wrestle with faith, wherever they are and whatever community they're a part of. Sorry, I just got my soapbox there a little bit, but
no.
Yeah.
So here I'll set things up for how we had the geek stage. And then will you drive and direct them to talk as y'all tell us about the different sessions? Because my goal is to keep these short enough that I can hook together, shorter podcasts. Like if I had like 2 40-minute ones and hook it. So that's what we're going for. So let's think of this as halfway. And then I'm going to do one with Tom about like the Ort stage and such. So, and here's why. This year, Beer Camp, last year we had different stages in different rooms when Will and I realized how many more people were coming than we thought. And then it's like, oh, we got to go rent a stage for in here. I'm going to go get a new sound system and this kind of thing. So we went into it this year going, well, if it's like last year, we got to make sure the stages are cool. And last year it was kind of like, oh, you just go do this to this stage because if you like this person's talk in the morning. And we wanted to break up the podcast and lecture times and such. And last year there were kind of the super nerd podcasts. Then there were like the ones that are more less nerd vocab and prior reading needed podcasts. And then we had a number of kind of geeky ones. And so this year we went into it going, let's have dedicated stages. So Tom's was running the open relational stage, and that was where like the super nerd sessions went down, like where they're talking about science and religion and deep pluralism and that kind of stuff. And on the main stage, you had the kind of topics that are more general, like patriarchy, Jesus, that kind of thing. And so the third stage was the geek stage, and these fellas were part of putting it together. And the idea there was if you wanted to sit your butt down because you have a pull list on Wednesdays, and this is what you're going to do at Beer Camp, like you're going to go the geek stage. Other than telling them y'all should do this because I already put it on the schedule, I got a giant banner for the background.
Yes.
That is the logo of the cantina in Mos Eisley in episode 4 of Star Wars. Well, I guess they've been back to the cantina since then, but with Hop Solo and Brewbacca, who just may or may not look like individuals that are licensed.
Just slightly off enough that you're not going to get sued.
No, I'm not even sure it's in that galaxy, right? Multiverse, all sorts. Who knows?
Completely original characters.
Completely original characters.
Brewbacca is definitely an original character. I'm going to get that action figure and not even take it out of a packet. I'm going to leave it, and it's going to be worth Tens of dollars 100 years from now.
It's like a troll doll at that point. I wouldn't do that. Just
Yeah,
a chair.
yeah. People are like, whoa, is that a Wookiee? I was like, I don't know.
What is a Wookiee?
For everyone to listen, if you weren't there, like, yeah, Tripp put on a Wookiee onesie, a Chewbacca onesie for the first night, and committed his ass off and sweated his ass off the entire night. And my favorite quote is somebody, I don't know if you heard it, Tripp, but somebody went by and said, "Chewbacca's my favorite Ewok," and I was like, "What did you just say? What did
Do you want to die?
You want to die? I'm about to strangle you." Chewbacca's my favorite Ewok. I was like, what the world? But he committed. And yeah, this backdrop is going to be used more than once when Tripp and I do events together here in Chapel Hill, or I go to Comic-Con and do panels. I'm stealing it. We're going to use it. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. All right, Will. So tell me kind of what y'all set out to do on the Geek stage, and get them to talk, because you'll know who to ask about what. I'm just going to sit here, interject, and possibly hit random sound effects.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think I've been on your podcast before to talk about how the space and the stage of like and superheroes really is a sandbox and a disarming way to wrestle with the same questions that theology and philosophy wrestle with, like, what does it mean to be human? Call to action. What does it mean to be a villain? Is there meaning or not in the universe? Chaos versus purposefulness, and all those things. And so these things we geek out on often help lead us and are asking the same questions that we do in religion and faith communities of faith. So in my life, doing a God Loves Geeks book club in my church to find an easier way to wrestle with those questions and just geek out and talk about the things we love. But also systematic Geekology, we try to create, we know there's a lot of toxic fandom out there, and there's often toxic fandom in communities of faith too. Wow, can't believe that. And so our goal is to create healthy conversations and to model for others how to have a healthy conversation around these things we really love and geek out on. And even if we disagree, we feel like the story should have gone in a different direction, still have a good friendly conversation and be friends at the end of the day, which hopefully can happen in communities. So we set up the stage really to start off with the first session with Donna Bowman, which wrote my favorite book in the Homebrewed Christianity series, How to Be Human, or How to Be the Best Bag of Bones You Can Be in the Universe. Fantastic book. And her husband, Noel Murray, who is a critic and a world-renowned movie and TV critic, and they have their pulse on pop culture and TVs and movies and those kinds of things. So they started off the Geek stage with an opening conversation, how to read pop culture. So if you're going to talk about pop culture like Star Wars, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, Doctor Who, then let's kind of boil it down to the foundation of, first of all, how do you read pop culture? And we read sacred texts in our community, faith communities. Well, there's sacred texts in fandom as well, whether it's Star Wars, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings. To Lord of the Rings a minute, why that is the most sacred of texts and brought out the most emotion out of people who are in the room, and why that should be, according to Tripp, a part of an added canon, an added epistle to scripture. So we started off with how to read pop culture, and so we're part of that. That was Ryan, right? Ryan, you and I were a part of that.
Yep.
And so they started off their conversation with really a conversation around the TV show that was a monumental and fun, foundational in terms of a game changer in how we watch television, how we discuss television, how we theorize about the stories that we love, and then behind the scenes, the actors and the directors behind it all and the theories. So they really kind of let that be the springboard to lead us into the further discussion. And I think the main message that we heard there, I think, from Donna, was saying, we love these stories so much. What we should really do is allow all the stories to tell the stories they want to tell first before we start picking it apart. Be a good listener. After a couple episodes or halfway through, or the series isn't done yet, on in your favorite TV show or characters you love, listen to what the story they're trying to say, and then later on lean into it more. Ryan, what am I missing there? Is that kind of how she started and was talking about that?
No, it was really spot on. I love that. I love that Donna helped everybody in the room and those who will hear it later. She presented a really easy framework on how to receive pop culture and not just react to pop culture.
Yeah.
Because that was one of my biggest things going in. I was like, okay, if we're learning how to read pop culture, really, like, what is a healthier way to engage with the things we love? Because I feel like for the most part, like those of us on this call and this chat right now, like I would say we have a healthy understanding of pop culture, but there's some people who either they don't interact with a lot of people who have healthy ways of engaging with pop culture, and so it's how can I be a more positive impact in those conversations? Or they're just like, hey, I just want to be better at this. I took the posture of like, I just want to be better at this. I want to enjoy the things I enjoy on that next level, but not be a dick about it. And that was really helpful because I have been that guy in the past. It was like, actually, Will likes legacy numbers for comics. I'm like, I used to be the legacy number guy. I used to be the actually this Easter egg showed up in this episode. And it's like, come on, dude, like you're missing the point. So I love that. Yeah. I love that Donna really helped. I felt like that was maybe the most. It was almost like a therapeutic thing that she's teaching. So I really enjoy that. And like Noel had so much cachet because he's like written for every major like media publication, and just having his perspective was kind of cool because he's literally written decades of critical reviews, and he was so soft-spoken and generous about it, like not an elitist and not a like I'm the journalist that covered Lost. He didn't come across as that guy. So they were both very helpful, and yeah, it was a great conversation. It was a great way to start off the stage, because I feel like the themes from the first one really impacted the subsequent 3 panels that we did.
Yeah, and if Noel's like a pop culture scholar, he's akin to John Dominic Crossan as a New Testament scholar. And when John Dominic Crossan's on stage, I didn't see him as being elitist or whatever. He's like, I have a lot of knowledge about this. I'm inviting you into what I'm learning, and I'm still amazed by what I'm learning. The story that we're entrusted with to take care of and also dissect and look at deeper. I think Noel creates. He's a scholar of pop culture and how to read that. And in some ways, a lot of people, that's their sacred text that guides their lives and leads it. And that's why there's such a passion behind it, and often can be a toxic fandom too. And Donna also talked about these franchises and stories being a living story, that they're being passed on from one generation to the next. And how do they live and breathe and evolve as they move, and being passed on from one IP or canonical writer to another. We talked about canon a little bit. We talked about, I'm a big Lost fan, but there was a writer strike in Lost, in the middle of Lost as well, and it really helped them reset how they were going to land the plane. There's a little pun there with the crash plane, but like how are they going to wrap up the story and end it, and how are they going to tell their story? And so here we are now, just coming off a writer strike, and a big part of that is equity and economics and pay, equal pay. And what does it mean that these corporations that own the IP and the canon, that control the story and don't pay their writers the appropriate amount because of streaming and AI, and this fight for who owns the IP and who's telling the story, and respect for that, the same way that it can be within our religions in terms of who owns the canon, the IP, and control, and the versus the laity, and who is manipulating or controlling the story. So all that kind of mirrored what we do with pop culture. So it was a good framework to lead us into what's next when we started talking about Doctor Who and Star Trek and Star Wars.
Oh yeah, and so people that weren't there, the flow is kind of like in the morning before lunch, there's a main session, and there'll be talks in a podcast type thing, and then there's the multiple stages. And so the first one on the first day was the kind of guide of sorts, as you've heard Ryan and Will talk about with Donna and Noel, which also the fact that a philosopher's married to a TV critic, and they both like to read what the other one's into.
It's cute.
It is cute. Yeah. Okay. So who was so that afternoon was the Doctor Who and Star Trek panel.
Yeah.
Who was
Yeah.
who was driving in that session?
Where Dr. James McGrath was a keynoter who kept talking about, excuse me, how he had prepared a couple hours of lecture, but he had to boil it down to 20 minutes, and he was going to do his best to do that. And he was in cosplay. He looked like Captain Kirk. He had a yellow shirt on. I think that's Captain Kirk. I'm not. But he was cosplaying, and he gave the presentation talk about Doctor Who and Star Trek and their place in pop culture and what they mean. And they're some of the oldest, longest running franchises in terms of sci-fi. Doctor Who, from British television to Star Trek from the 60s all the way in to today. So there's some of the longest running franchises that are out there. And so he picked apart a little bit what they're trying to say and the mirror that it holds up to the human condition. And so he spoke for 20 minutes, and then Sari and Ryan, I believe that was you. Yeah. So
Yep.
Sari's not here with us. She's Sari's the biggest Star Trek fan out of all of us. We tease each other about which is the better franchise, Star Wars or Star Trek. It's not a competition, but man, she has a Spock tattoo on her arm. So she beats me. I don't have a Star Wars tattoo.
Yeah.
So she's committed. Ryan,
Yeah.
what did you hear within there and what was lifted up? There's two big franchises. So they could have been one on their own. Doctor Who on its own, Star Trek on its own. But we combined the two because Dr. McGrath wrote a book on theology of Doctor Who and on Star Trek. So and sci-fi.
Yeah.
So check those out.
So a few things about that stage. Sari really should be the one breaking this down because I mean she and James could not have killed it more. Like it was great. And I think to me, like just reading the room during that one, it was like the people that were there for Star Trek and Doctor Who, I feel like they felt seen because of the franchises we talked about. It's like you can be a casual Lord of the Rings fan, you can be a casual Star Wars fan. I feel like there aren't, at least to my knowledge, not many like casual Star Trek fans. Like you're either in or you are out. Or like you're like, oh, I've heard of like Captain Kirk, I've heard of Spock, and they'd be like, you know, well, which version of it have you heard of it? Like, and Doctor Who, like, if you're a Doctor Who fan, like you are in the weeds, like up to your eyebrows. Like those guys knew everything James was talking about, hanging on every word that he said. One thing about James McGrath, Will Rose is my Obi-Wan. James McGrath is my freaking Yoda. That guy is delightful. Like Nick and I think it was Nick and I were talking about like this, how like he has this way about him where you're just like, I want to be around him. Like, yeah, he's going to say some really wise and smart stuff, but he's also going to be hilarious about it. Yeah. And like he literally reminded me of Yoda. And I said one night, I was like, hey, James, I'm just wondering, would you consider being my Yoda, my personal Yoda? And he's like, oh yeah, sure. Yeah, that'd be awesome. And I was like, cool. Like, I'm not joking. And he's like, oh, I just figured it was a short joke. And I was like, no, dear God, it's not just a short joke. I am very serious about this. And like, he was probably one of my favorite parts about the entire weekend, but like specifically that session with Sari, just the empathy with which he was guiding that conversation. And we got to the end. One of the final Q&A questions someone asked was how to kind of compare the current canonical continuity of Star Trek with Gene Roddenberry's like initial purpose for the show. And really, like, does the current Star Trek capture the hopefulness that Gene Roddenberry saw for humanity? And James had this really, really great, like insightful take on it. And because I am not the dyed in the wool like Star Trek fan, I was just like, all of this is going over my head, and I absolutely love it because we're talking about hope through sci-fi, and it gets to kind of something that Nick and Craig Boyd and TJ talked about with Lord of the Rings later on, this theme of hope and looking forward and feeling energized by the stories that we hear. I was energized by just being a part of that conversation with James and Sari. And I mean, it was a great conversation. The people in the room definitely the fans that were in the room of those franchises, I feel really felt seen and heard and very engaging. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Also noticing that the intergenerational aspect of beer camp.
Oh yeah,
you have they're all drinking age. There might be a couple underage people there who were there with their parents, but you really have a wide spectrum of an age group of people who are wrestling with the question. It's not just a young adult thing that they're trying to be edgy or ask questions. There's people who are been wrestling with these things for a long time, and so on the Geek stage we still have this intergenerational group who are geeking out on things. But I feel like the Doctor Who, Star Trek was a little bit older crowd because it's been around a while, and they were like,
it totally was.
It was definitely some of the my age and older when it comes to this kind of sci-fi that people do.
Yeah, it still probably had the lowest average because I was there.
That's right. You brought down the average.
TJ really brought down the average.
Every session, we got down at least a decade or two because of TJ.
You gotta hold on to that.
That's right.
Well, now TJ, you were up there for the next session, right?
Mm-hmm. Next was Star Wars the next day.
Talking about A New Hope. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about it.
So, our man, who was our keynote speaker? Hold on,
Travis
McMakin. Yeah.
It was Travis.
Yeah. Yep. And he just goes off, and it feels like he got his doctorate specifically in religion and Star Wars. He's just absurdly knowledgeable about this. Right. Downstairs on the Ort stage, they were talking about pluralism, and before anybody knows it, we're also talking about pluralism because Star Wars kind of lends itself to that, naturally, and it was amazing. It's the first time I've ever engage with a deeper analysis of Star Wars, not just like what it means in universe, because I've done that, but taking Star Wars and comparing it to the real world is the first time I've ever sat and listened and been engaged with something like that, and it's amazing. It's absolutely absurd because I don't make those connections easily. I grew up very take fiction as fiction, and then I'm allowed to watch whatever I want because it's fiction. But it was so cool, and I wish I could just talk to him more about it because I personally feel like I didn't get enough out of it, and I was hosting the panel, so I can only imagine what it felt like to be in the audience. But it was really, it's so special to see how people connect with something like Star Wars, because you can just go and watch cool laser swords fighting. Or you can.
I think Tripp has his contact information.
Or you can grapple with, duality and how that reflects on your own religion, your own worldview. So I loved it. I followed him on Instagram immediately, and I'm just waiting an appropriate amount of time to DM him questions.
Slide in Travis's DMs.
I am.
So does anyone remember the kind of conversations that got sparked? Because the fun thing about these sessions was, one, getting different nerds who are also geeky to come at the beginning, kind of frame the conversation so all the podcasters know what areas of it they're going to talk about. But then we kind of told them, y'all set things up for 20 minutes and then y'all can have an hour to go all sorts of places. And I know at your stage, especially because so many people were there throughout the whole time, at least as someone that rotated through all the stages, it seemed that as each session got on, everyone got more used to getting geeky with each other, that then it would go from conversation with the speaker between the podcasters and then grow, or then by the end, everyone's just kind of, passing a mic around and such. So that wasn't happening at other stages.
We're geeky. We do Comic-Con things,
Yeah,
Nick finally saved us with passing the mic around.
No, it was good.
Right.
Some of the conversations, because the whole kind of theme around, I feel like this year's beer camp was kind of deconstructing, right? The kind of just that word that's become so popular, and I think that Donna and Noel's framework was so helpful just because of geekdoms and fandoms get pretty serious about just kind of dying on certain hills, but people recognize that it's a fandom, And so people can kind of are more open, I feel like, to conversations most of the time. And so if somebody blows your mind about a certain universe or like fan theory or, a different issue or a new canon branching off, I feel like people are pretty, a lot more open to those things being a possibility and allowing it to transform them. And so those questions all kind of mostly, I feel like, in the questions that people asked at the end of the sessions, that theme was kind of incorporated into those conversations where, Travis talked about the Force kind of being the love versus fear, and how love was a reflection of John, in the Gospel of John. And then, of course, that just triggered people to just like, oh, make those connections. And through that, and we did that with Lord of the Rings too, talking about hope and despair. And when you're on the journey with people and how everything you knew, what you thought you knew was certain, right? The Shire is beautiful forever, right? Until someone says, actually, there's a war going on. And if you don't participate in it, it's going to end, right? And so these questions and conversations just kept popping up between speakers, podcasts, and attendees, as you alluded to, Tripp.
Well, Nick, while you're talking about the Tolkien thing, maybe throw in a little bit about how Craig framed the conversation. You and I did Tolkien last year at Beer Camp, and it was a fun session, not just because there was pictures of beer on the table, but once Samwise comes up and Tripp's tipsy, it just turns into a little sermon, and he starts crying. But I thought, well, if I'm not the one doing it, then maybe they won't have, awkward tears show up at the middle of a session. But
oh boy,
little I know, Craig, got set things up.
Yeah, people got weepy, including Ryan and myself. And so
yes, I did. Totally confirmed.
and that's just what Lord of the Rings does to you, and maybe it needs to be put forth as one of the proofs to be incorporated into the canon. But Craig framed hope and despair, just the Lord of the Rings through the lens of hope and despair, really. And he just talked about these places where hope is just a very small stream, that it's very, it's hard to find. He used the word glimpse, which Tolkien also used. You catch this glimpse of hope, right? And he kind of connected that to our own spiritual experience, especially at Beer Camp, where many of us have been told certain things, don't question certain things. And so maybe we've been in this darkness, right? And how there's just a glimpse of hope, whether it be a podcast, right? Whether it be Homebrew Christianity that we started listening to 10 years ago by ourselves and made sure not to tell our ministers or close friends. So people weren't like, what? You don't believe that God is all powerful, or whatever. And you're like, no. And
you know what I say when people are trying to tell me about omnipotence?
Tell us.
If you're the sour.
Great reference, because this is, Tom Ord wrote a book called The Death of Omnipotence, The Rise of Omnipotence, and he brings up Sauron as being the god of omnipotence.
Yeah.
So plug for his book.
And Tripp gets a shout out in that book.
Oh, all the best books do.
Yeah.
When it comes to when omnipotence is on the menu, you know what Tom Ward says?
Give me the meat and give it to me raw.
Yeah, I feel like it's a little different than most of Tripp's shout outs, though, because this one's specifically about the Grand Teton Mountains.
Oh yeah.
Right?
That's a little 6-minute bit that if I get going,
it's a spoiler.
It is 6 minutes. It's 6 minutes.
Now, I'll jump in a sec. Just, like, in terms of the Tolkien, I think out of all the nerd geek franchises, Lord of the Rings has a sacred text. Star Wars has legacy characters and the movies and the spin-offs, and you have the comic books that the superhero movies are based off of, which could be sacred text. But Lord of the Rings has the most like allusion to a sacred text. And so when I'm just an observer, not on the stage, I'm watching, people are reading from the sacred text. And as they're reading from the sacred text of Lord of the Rings, they're getting weepy and moved emotionally by the text itself and what's happening in there. And so I was moved by that. And so I don't know if Nick and Tripp, in terms of literature, in terms of talking about the sacred text of Lord of the Rings, what it moves for people and how it's endured, yes, been made into movies and video games and spin-offs, but yet it's still, you go back to the text of what Tolkien was writing about these characters that you love. What it is about this, that in the people in the room are quoting their favorite verse from the sacred text and getting weepy about it. What is it about this text?
Well, Ryan, tell us what went down. Like, what was it when that conversation where it got real?
Will, that felt like it was directed at me because I was. Well, so here's the thing.
I don't think I was even in the room when you did that. I was downstairs and I came back up, so I witnessed others. But yeah.
Okay, well, fair is fair. I'll take it back. So I have a favorite character from Lord of the Rings, like most people do, and when Craig kept, which by the way, I feel pretty confident saying this. The Lord of the Rings panel at the Geek Stage was probably the only panel at Theology Beer Camp that had story time, because Craig Boyd read a passage from the sacred text.
And sorry, I'll interrupt, because he said after he read it, he said, "This is the word of God for the people of God," and everyone said, "Thanks be to God."
It was so good. I loved that Craig did that, and it was so enjoyable. But then as he's talking about hope and despair, Kim turns to me and she like knows what I'm about to do, because when I think of hope and despair in Lord of the Rings, I think of my favorite character Faramir and his like march out of Minas Tirith to go fight the unwinnable battle against Osgiliath, and his conversation with Denethor, and just the lines in that scene, how they hit me so impactfully. And Craig kept mentioning Denethor, and I was like, oh man, it's like he's daring me to do it. So I read the interchange between Denethor and Faramir from the movie version, and I could not get through it. I barely got through the last line, and I was like, I have heard these lines. I have said these lines hundreds of times. Why right now? And I think it speaks to what, we're getting at, what Will specifically said, like, this is like, it's like a nerd sacred text. And we all come to it like pseudo scripture, because it speaks to so much of our own journeys, our own hopes, our own despair. And it was honestly one of my favorite moments. And I kept telling Nick at the after party, I was like, I share so much, like on my own podcast and with my friends. Like, I'm not exactly stingy with my feelings and my emotions for stuff, but for some reason that felt like the perfect storm. When we were talking about that in Lord of the Rings, I was like, I don't know, it just hit me. It hit me so much differently. And yeah, it was awesome. It was great.
Can I, before, I know we're a little over time, but I think just making a processy, nerdy connection to answer Will's question about why Tolkien kind of is a sacred text. And I think there's this sort of like, to tie it, to get into this process articulation of God, where we've got this primordial nature, that the text will always be there, right? That Tolkien is this unchanging text, right? We've got, no matter what happens in the world of fandom and things, we've always got the Silmarillion, we've always got the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings. But the consequential nature of it is that it manifests itself through the Peter Jackson films, audiobooks read by Andy Serkis, things like that. And so no matter what, things change as culture moves and new problems arise and answer those questions. But ultimately, we still rely on the same text.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good point. Just even in how the different mediums we relate to them differently, and with so much of all the modern religions became much more textual as literacy went up, and obviously printing got cheaper, and such, and so there became a reverence for text, which I think is one of the reasons Tolkien set out to write a mythology, right, for a people that didn't have one. And where did he go? The texts that were from the cultures before that are feeding into it. Then anyway, we don't need to detour into Tolkien. I mean, there's a reason. There's a reason the only one that sold more books than him in the 20th century, was God. Just saying. Says the man with the Tolkien head sitting over his shoulder, the little Tolkien and Whitehead statues. Which when we played the game at the opening night, when we were doing Family Feud and stuff in my office, no one said like my very pretty folio copy of Lord of the Rings or the Lord of the Rings that we showed around when we were doing it. They didn't say anything about my Tolkien.
No, they did.
head.
They totally did. That was an answer.
No, that was my answer, and they said they didn't have any point. That wasn't one of them. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? They're just sitting behind me.
No, it's because the question was things you'd be surprised to find in Tripp Fuller's office. That's why one of the answers was Tripp Fuller.
Oh,
which Leah Robinson killed that. Like, it was so good.
Yeah.
Well, Tripp, are you willing to reveal like next year's beer camp theme? And this was the God Pod Strike Back with a heavy Star Wars theme. And we're talking about Tolkien. Are you ready to reveal, or is that?
I don't know officially but I mean, I want it to be Return of the God Pods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tolkien is. There you go.
I really want John Garth to come. That's what I want.
Amen.
I want John Garth to come and
main stage leading into the Geek stage.
I want him to
main stage Geek Pod.
I want him to preach from Tolkien. That's what I want. John Garth. And if y'all haven't watched the interview from the last Tolkien Heads thingy we did with him, then you're just missing out, because we wanted to talk to him about his relationship with Tolkien. John Garth, by the way, if you have no idea, is like the greatest living Tolkien biographer, brilliant Tolkien scholar, and such. But we and he's written multiple books on him and this kind of thing. And he'd been on before when Nick and I did the first Tolkien Heads thing online. And then, so when he came back on, we wanted to talk to him about his relationship with Tolkien as someone who's a secular humanist, but kind of like uses Tolkien to get at the depth dimension of existence and wrestling with kind of the big questions about life and such. And, Nick and I made up some questions and sent it to him. Little did we know he had like prepared detailed, vulnerable, personal answers to them all. And I was like, oh my goodness. And then when one of them was like, if you were going to preach a sermon from Tolkien, anything in the Legendarium, what are you going to do? And then he just wet our whistle. He was just like, started hitting at it. And I'm like, note to self. Don't y'all want a giant banner with like all our favorite characters in the Green Dragon?
Oh,
that's what, like, it'd be behind it, like. And I thought, what if we have a hole in the head where there's like Strider in the background, and you can go sneak and stick your head in the Strider hole?
That'd be sick.
The Strider hole.
Yeah. You walk over there, like you put your head through, and you're like,
long bottom leaf,
and you can take your little picture of it. Yeah, like obviously you got Mary and Pippin over in the corner.
It comes in paints.
Just going to Pound Town, and
oh gosh!
No, there's a lot of interviews with Tolkien scholars where we ask them a variation of Kill Mary Screw.
Oh no!
And but it was you're stuck at Helm's Deep, right? Who are you going to battle down with if you're going to count taking out murder bots called orcs, like any character from Legendarium. And then it was like, who do you want to journey to Mordor with? But you can't pick Sam. That's cheat code. And then it was like, who do you want to go to Pound Town with at the Prancing Pony? And now I just want you to know, in my lexicon, Pound Town is when you're about to just go drink a lot of beers.
Yeah, that's not how I interpret
Nick,
that.
Literally
John's your
everybody-
favorite moment.
Man.
Literally everybody else had the same context of we're talking about
Right.
just getting the business. And probably my favorite moment, and I don't know if we're thinking about the same moment.
I'm pretty sure we are.
Is it Chris Vaccaro?
Yes.
Chris Vaccaro, who talked about Beowulf on our class. He said, he kind of gave one of these looks like, okay, you want to know this? And he was like, it's Aemir. And he was like, specifically movie Aemir, something to do with the nostrils gets me going. And we were like, at that point we were just letting him go. And I was like, actually, what Tripp meant to say is, who would you like to drink with?
Carl Urban does it for him.
Oh, we got insight into the men that Chris Vaccaro.
Oh my
is
gosh,
into.
that's so good.
It was great. It was absolutely wonderful. He was such a good sport about it.
He would muster the Rohirrim in a heartbeat.
Ooh. Oh yeah. I'm not going to take that further.
So
Blow the horn of Gondor.
Blow the horn. Gondor called for aid and Chris Vaccaro answered.
So for our listeners and watchers,
want-
whoever, like,
You
instead
want to
of
stick your head in the Strider hole next
You wanna-
year at Theology Beer
Strider.
Camp?
you should come. But like at one moment you're weeping reading the sacred text of Lord of the Rings. Next minute you're talking about
man.
Pound Town with your favorite characters. That's what geeks do, y'all. We do these games. We weep at our
yikes.
legacy characters, and then we turn and play these games and laugh, cry about answers. So that's man, that's so good.
You know what?
What's
You know
your-
what I was thinking, Will? I was thinking if next year it's let's say Pacific Northwest, then the road trip will be twice as long.
Yeah,
The road trip will
Oh,
be very
yikes.
short. The
Yeah.
road trip will be to Greenville Airport.
We're Greenville Airport.
Tripp and I will
TJ.
make the ride and stay at Nick's, then Ryan's, and then we'll just pick up more people along the way, all the way to Dancoke Land.
Oh my gosh, the Northwest.
I know. And then when we get there, we can go find out if our banners arrived. We're like, have you considered what? Maybe we'd have to cast lots to decide who's putting their head through the Strider hole first.
Rock, paper, scissors for it.
Yeah, no, I think that has to be Tripp. Like he's the beer camp guru. Like we got to get that his head's in there first.
But you have to roll a d20 or else
That's
it doesn't
right.
happen.
That's
A
right.
natty D20.
Natty.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
No
which brings up the
modifiers.
point. That's another point. That's another fandom out there. This kind of role playing games, tabletop role playing games has been brought up about doing a D&D session. It's so it's so collaborative in terms of how they unfold, and so open and relational when it comes to that. So I think that is something to add to next year. Is something about D&D role playing games, doing a live one on stage and having people participate and be a part of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a number of people would be excited about that. And which, by the way, if you actually watch this video all the way to the 50-minute point, after Ryan at the beginning is dropping weird lingo where you have to actually go to a comic book store to know what legacy numbers are and things like your geek level has to be high from very early on. So if you're right here right now, then you definitely want to go check out all the podcasts involved, which will be linked. But also, if you're like, I want to go to the Geek stage next year. I want to get my butt in those seats. You should reach out, especially if you have a podcast, because they might be looking for people to play some role playing games.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows what else other than other than the
Strider holes.
the
If you
strider
want to
hole.
put your face in the Strider hole,
Yeah. I'm just saying. I'm just
We can
saying.
make it happen.
Yeah, we could just put holes on all the faces, and then you have like a Strider hole, a Frodo hole,
just
a
a
Sam
wall of
hole,
holes.
a Billy hole.
A Billy
I'm
hole.
I'm 100% on board for the Billy hole.
Of course you are.
Or a Farmer Maggot hole.
Oh no! No,
Ooh.
not the farmer maggot.
What
hole.
about a Tom
Tom
Bombadil
Bombadilly
hole.
hole.
Bombadilly hole? A Bombadilly hole.
Bombadilly hole.
Oh my gosh. Geeks are fun.
You could stick your head in the horn of Gondor.
Ooh.
Oh no!
I have a didgeridoo. We can pretend, you know.
Well played, DJ.
Well played.
All right.
Well played.
Come up with it.
Thank y'all for hanging out. I can't wait to see you next year at Beer Camp.
Bombadilly hole.